Weight cuts have killed a lot of people. If you were like 1% dehydrated going into any athletic endeavor, you lose about 10% in performance. People say you've got to eat perfectly all the time. That's the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard in my entire life. A good way to think of restriction when it comes to diets is kind of like a pendulum. So if you think this is restriction, the more I restrict you in what you're eating and the cravings you get and the hungry you get and things like that, at some point something's going to happen that'll make you let go, and the furthest you'll swing that way.
Jiu-jitsu athletes, competitors, and fighters, what's the most important piece of advice that you would give them?
Right, the biggest piece of advice that I can give to anybody that will apply for the longest period of time, right, is
So, I'm joined today by Mike Lang of Unorthodox Nutrition, nutritionist specializing in jiu-jitsu and MMA athletes, competitors, and hobbyists. Mike, thank you so much for being here today. I'm super excited for this.
thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to it.
Awesome. So, to get us started, can you tell us a bit about your background and how Unorthodox Nutrition came to be?
Yeah, so I've been coaching combat athletes for nearly 17 years now. It started long, long, long ago, where I had a background in nutrition and things like that, and I've always loved combat sports. Got into like watching the UFC through a friend of mine. But back then, it was before obviously social media and things like that. We used to have like chat rooms or called forums in the UK, and there was the Cage Warriors forum. Obviously, Cage Warriors is still going and the biggest promotion in Europe. But there used to be a section on there called nutrition, where people would just talk about nutrition of what they were doing, ask questions, that kind of thing. So I would just help people and start answering questions and things like that. And then eventually a couple of people said, "Oh, well, can you help me with my weight cut or my camp?" Started doing that. And then they got great results. They spoke to people. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. And then it's just kind of grew over the years from that.
That's so cool. So, it was like the fighters in that forum that were asking you questions?
Yeah, a mix of both the fighters and people who were just like doing MMA and things like that as a hobby. Obviously, there was some great guys back there that, I think like even like Paddy Pimblett and stuff was on there, but he was like 14 years old at the time. So I might have sold Paddy short there. He might have actually been younger.
Oh my gosh, that sounds super, super cool. And so even before that happened, what drew you to want to pursue being a nutritionist?
So when I was younger, I was overweight. And then as I got older, I obviously wanted to lose the weight and started looking into obviously like working out. It was the nutrition side of it that I always found like super, super interesting rather than the actual training side of it, even though that is still very, very interesting. It just like, I don't know, it was just something about it that I really, really enjoyed. And then obviously the more I learned about it, the more I wanted to learn about it. So it just kind of started from there and just went deeper and deeper, really.
Yeah, that's super cool. I think that the nutrition is something that a lot of people don't care to learn too much about and would rather, have a coach looking after it for them. So it's amazing that people like you are, interested in that kind of thing and willing to do all the calculations for people that just really want to focus on the training. So that's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what makes your approach unorthodox compared to traditional sports nutritionists?
So that's actually a terrible, terrible brand name that I came up with that long ago that I shouldn't have done, but I'm stuck with it at this point. So it was just something that I liked the sound of. I suppose in today's age, the thing that makes it unorthodox is it's not really one method of doing something. It's what's best for the client that follows the right nutritional principles. Like the the MMA and jiu-jitsu market and everything is full of really kind of like either restrictive or fad diets like keto or carnivore or 5-2 or intermittent fasting, which are all kind of very extreme diets for people to get results, where I have clients that do like all of these and also or like none of them, where we just take like a very kind of like sensible approach to everything. And it's more about kind of like fitting in what works best for them and what they prefer, as well as what's going to get them results. Don't get me wrong, there's pretty much no pros that are doing keto or carnivore or anything like that. That's something that only exists on Instagram and not in the real world, thankfully.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a great approach, working with people's individual wants and needs and stuff. And so you mentioned, specifically in the MMA and Jiu-Jitsu sphere, there's, things that operate a little bit differently. So what do you think are like some specific challenges that Jiu-Jitsu and MMA athletes face that other kinds of athletes maybe don't face?
So a couple of ones. So I'll split them up in both MMA and Jiu-Jitsu. So if we start with MMA, MMA is really like five sports in one, where other sports, apart from like triathletes and decathletes, which is still, like triathletes is still only three, MMA athletes still have to work on, striking, which in of itself includes boxing, kickboxing, Thai. And then they've got grappling, which in of itself includes judo, sambo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, catch wrestling, and I suppose shooter as well. So there's another five. And then wrestling in of itself again. And then you've got, they also have to look at like their strength and conditioning, stuff like that, which all athletes do. So there's a big variety there of what they need. And most athletes, like MMA athletes, until they start to get to like the very top levels, still have to hold down full-time jobs. They still, have 40 plus hours to work. They may have children. They may have, families and other responsibilities. So how they go about structuring their days and their weeks around all these sessions for different sports, plus all of their own individual responsibilities, is very highly individual. Somebody who, works from home and can manage their own time is very different to somebody who works shifts or is a firefighter, or or someone who works construction, is very physically active as well. So it's the kind of, what's confusing people is for them to take all these things that they need and put all the pieces together so they can get great results out of their training, never mind when they start to actually enter a camp. So that's kind of MMA. With jiu-jitsu is probably one of the hardest sports to program for in the world. And the reason being is, if we take MMA or boxing, for example, when you go into a session for boxing or MMA, it might be pad work or technical work. You know when a sparring session's coming up. You know when a hard wrestling session's coming up. Okay. So you know when you require more fuel for those sessions and which ones are going to be lighter, which ones are going to be harder. Jiu-jitsu is a clusterfuck of all of these things. Can I swear on this podcast? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So you do jiu-jitsu yourself, right, Maddie? That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So you know yourself, you'll go, I'm going to take it easy today. We're going to have like a light to medium session. And then you start rolling with one of your regular training partners. And, you're starting light, you're out here. But then, see, you're laughing already because So
Yes.
they go there. So you go there. And then they go there. And then you go there. And then before your light session turns into comp rounds with 3 or 4 people. Or hard sessions all suddenly turn into easy sessions because just of the people who you get matched up with or whatever it is. So it's very hard for people to pick out sessions like this. So you need to kind of look at where MMA and other sports you can kind of look in as a session or a day-to-day basis. Jiu-jitsu people need to look at over the course of like a week and have like still days within that, but they're not going to get as planned results because this is changing in jiu-jitsu with ecological approaches, and I know the guys over at B Team do a lot of work, and especially in regards to heart rates and things like that now, which is fantastic. But it's a very hard sport program from like my perspective, because one per like, and belts are different as well with jiu-jitsu. So like if you look at white belts that start, white belts lose loads of weight really quickly because they're dead spastic, and black belts don't, because they become a lot more effective in their movements. So they only move when they have to rather than just all the time. So programming for upper belts is different from when you program for lower belts and things like that. So there's quite a few differences that happens. And obviously, the jiu-jitsu people still have all the responsibilities and children and jobs and all that kind of thing as well. So lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, yeah, that totally makes sense. That must make your job quite difficult. So, in a perfect world, would you, have your clients like know and tell you what days are going to be hard days and you plan specifically for their nutrition for fueling those hard days in a perfect world?
Yeah, so yeah, like in a perfect world, if I could follow all my clients around with a stick and hit them over the back of the head when they started going too hard in rounds, then yeah, that'd be brilliant. Because then we can start being very, very concise. And if you look at a lot of like pro sports, like in the US, like the NFL and the NBA and things like that, all of their programming is based on generally like percentage work or percentage of exertion and things like that. So it's much easier to program for rather than, and it's very structured. This is technical work, this is harder work, etc. Where jujitsu in most schools doesn't, for the most part, follow a curriculum for all of the time and things like that. And it's a bit all over the place. So in a perfect world, if I could make all clients do that, it's great. But that also takes the fun out of jujitsu because the part of like the jujitsu, like the fun of jujitsu is that you can spar hard all the time and it still be fun. Like you can't do that in MMA and do full contact 100% sparring all the time because you get brain damage after a couple of months. So so I don't, yes, I would love them to do it, but it would also rob the fun out of it for them as well.
Yeah, yeah, totally. That makes sense. That makes sense. So I think that with jujitsu in particular, a lot of people don't really pay much mind to nutrition. I think it's probably different in MMA with the more kind of severe weight cutting that they have to do. I think a lot of jiu-jitsu competitors, they show up, they're having fun, they're locked in with it, but I think a lot of them ignore the nutrition side. So for those that may not have an understanding of nutrition and how they should be actually fueling their body, what kind of where would you get them started with understanding this is what fueling your body should look like?
So that's a very broad question and quite a hard one to answer. So all diets should really be built around whole, nutritious foods. Generally, most people kind of know what's healthy and what's not. You know that, an apple is better for you than a candy bar. But it's kind of getting people to kind of have a structure with that. And it's structure that makes a difference because we're all creatures of habit. We get up the same way, we brush our teeth the same way, we get dressed the same way. If we ever take a vacation after so long, we actually want to get back to our routine a little bit. So it's finding like how they can set up like nutritious plans that work for them. So it's no good telling people with insane schedules that they have to make like crazy recipes and things like that because after a couple of days they're not going to do it because it's just too hard. So what foods can we actually put together for people at the right times? So we know, for example, that um, protein is something that is required for most athletes. Most people kind of know that now. Not so much for, bodybuilder level of muscle growth and things like that, but for tissue repair on the whole. So muscle and tendons and things like that. So we need it for that. Carbohydrate is something that a lot of people talk about. It's our body's most preferred fuel source. It's not only what our bodies and our muscles run on, but it's what our brains run on. Now, if you think for jujitsu, and a lot of people, the reason that they love jujitsu is because it's fast, live problem solving with consequences by the way. So if you are not giving your brain the fuel that it requires to make decisions fast and good decisions, then you will suck. So it's why like a lot of people when they run like keto, carnivore, etc., they feel like brain fog and stuff like that. If you diet particularly hard and are on very low calories for a period of time, you'll find yourself having a bit of a brain fog. You can't get your words out. You keep forgetting to do things, etc. So it's giving people the right amount of like both calories and the macronutrients that they require. And there's tons of great ones online now where they can go in, type in their name, height, and things like that. But it does require them to be able to track those calories, i.e., weigh their foods logically and do it. Even if they did that for a period of time, a couple of weeks, it would give them a much better insight into kind of like how they should be eating.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And something that you alluded to there is that it's important to not overwhelm someone with habits and, food habits that are gonna kind of derail the rest of how their life works. You know what I mean? And so I think you've talked about this in previous podcasts too, the importance of consistency when it comes to nutrition. And I think that that's something that a lot of people struggle with. And probably in your position, you've seen a lot of people struggle with it. So with your experience, what are some of the strategies that you use with new clients to kind of help them get on track, but do so in a way that's going to be consistent for them?
Yeah, so consistency is the most important thing when it comes to like diet, getting better at jujitsu, everything like that. It's a weird thing because if we take like jujitsu and MMA, people know it takes a long time to acquire those skills, and you need to be consistent in your training to be able to do that. But then they don't apply that to other areas of their life where they, would get the benefits from it. So the best way when you can start layering in these things for clients is finding the things that require the least friction in their lives. So a good example is like if we go back to like recipes and food prep. For a lot of people who have very demanding jobs or young children or lives or whatever it or schedules, etc., like students, etc., prepping a full like week's worth of meals is they just don't have the time to be able to do it. Or it's not that they don't have the time to be able to do it, but it's a big ask of them to be consistent with when you start. So, what decisions can we make where it requires no prep for their meals? Is it like ready-made, like you know, protein bars, yogurts, fruits, carb sources like microwavable bags of rice and things like that. Things that are very, very easy for people to just grab and make, and start with that. And then we might like, everyone hears of and it generally comes from physique sports such as bodybuilding and powerlifting things, but like generally they talk about 6 small meals a day. Um, but that's quite a lot for a person who might only eat once or twice a day. Um, so why don't we start with like 3 meals a day? People who like have a very hectic schedule in the morning, they might have to get themselves up, they might have to get ready, partners might have to get ready, they might have long commutes, they might have small children, they might have work to do before they eat, whatever it is, like giving them crazy breakfasts that they need to prepare or a breakfast at all might not be the thing that's right for them. Like some form of protein shake and some fruit, etc. Or even like thinking, right, well, what can you grab on your commute? Like I know people go, well, there's this like deli near me, or actually the only thing I've got is, a McDonald's or whatever it is on the drive to work. Like, okay, well, this is the options that we can have that still fit in with what we're trying to do that isn't going to be really hard for you. Because even if you write the most perfect plan in the world, if it's a real pain for you to do it, even the most dedicated person won't do it for a long period of time because you can't force yourself, like even with the greatest will, to keep doing it. The second part of consistency when it comes to diet is hunger. Human beings are the worst things ever to be hungry. If you make people hungry enough, they will eat each other. Like that's a fact. Like so, telling them not to go to that vending machine, or the million drive-throughs they drive past, or the foods in the store, or whatever, is stupid if they're really, really hungry. Obviously, if we're looking for people to lose fat, then they require a caloric deficit to do that. But we only need it just enough to get them to lose the weight, not crazy. So, like, I want to lose like 5 pounds a week. Like, whoa, 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 let's just lose 1 pound a week and start with that. So you're not crazy hungry all the time and build from that. So it's just finding what's going to cause them the least amount of pain that's going to get them the biggest results.
Yeah, yeah, no, those are all really, really important things. And so with the consistency, you mentioned how you start with the things that are going to be the add the least friction to their life. And then once they kind of are building these habits, then do you kind of start to build up and go a little bit more
Mhm.
intense with the nutrition?
Yep. Yeah, yeah. So we generally like we'll generally start, especially with athletes that do like MMA and jiu-jitsu, they will start have it built around like training. What good habits can we put around training? Because they're going to see the benefit in like very quickly. So how can we make sure the foods we eat before training, during training, and after training are going to help facilitate great performance and recovery from it. And then we can start to build out from there. Some people may have more time in the middle of the day than they do at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day. So we start add things around there when they're like just hitting consistently what they need to start with. Then you can start adding more and more complexity, and that's when you start to do. And that's over a period of time. It's not like to day one you're going to do this, day two you're going to do this. Like it's after like a few days or a week or a couple of weeks. But then you start into getting like like specific stuff. So like pro fighters might have like specific plans for wrestling days, sparring days, pad work, non-training days, all that kind of thing. Or shift workers might have, if they're on earlys or late or nights, they may have specific days set up for each one of those. Um, or if they have demanding schedules or whatever reason, like they might have that. But that's layered in over time. And again, it's very important that like it fits the individual. There's no point telling, even on the like say the perfect day set for training, I was like, right, you're going to eat 6 times a day. These are the exact to the minute times that you're supposed to eat. Like, even if that person can do it, life happens all the time. They may get caught in traffic. They may have a terrible day at work. They may have a fight with their partner, all these kind of things. So it's not so much this is the perfect plan. It's what can we do when the perfect becomes imperfect, which happens to everybody all of the time. How many times do people set up, right? It's going to be a training day, start eating foods for a training day, for example, and then they have to stay late at work, or they get caught in traffic, or the subway breaks down, or whatever it is. So then they miss training. So what do they do in those situations? Like, which a key is being able to have like good options for them then, and not then just press it the fuck it button and just like go, oh well, I might as well go to KFC now because I've missed training. Like it's like sometimes it's stopping people from doing those things as well.
Yeah, totally. And what you just mentioned there, I think that that's one of the most interesting things about, humans and our relationship with food is a lot of people have kind of like an all or nothing mentality when it comes to being healthy and monitoring their food intake. And, you go off track a little bit and it's like, I'm already too
Yeah,
far gone, you know what I mean? So I imagine that you deal with that all the time. And so what kind of what do you do in those situations as a nutritionist?
so for me, the biggest thing for me and my clients is that it's communication in those kind of things. Like that it's that they like I want to get always across to them like they can speak to me 7 days a week at any time. Like when this happens, just message me and we talk about it. You know what I mean? Like so then we can make decisions on what we're going to do. Either we have a plan in place from previously when it's happened, or we'll make one then. Um, and sometimes, like with life, like don't get me wrong, there's a lot of put forward on social media and stuff where people say you've got to eat perfectly all the time. Like you should never have that tub of Ben and Jerry's. You should never go to KFC. You shouldn't have a couple of drinks with friends, all that kind of thing. That's the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Like we are all human and we all want to do nice things. It's just the times in which we do it. So clients might say, look, I've got a wedding this weekend, or I haven't seen my friend, like this friend who's coming in from out of town. We want to go get dinner and drinks, or, my partner wants to go to this new restaurant or whatever it is. Then we go, okay, where are we in what we need to achieve? Are we like, have we got a fight booked at the moment? Are we 1 week out or no? Like if we're 1 week out, then, there's things that you can have to say, well, no, that's a stupid idea. But if you're weeks and weeks out, then yeah, we can work these things in, no problem. So what you'll find a lot of people who have like when the tiniest thing happens to them, the day goes wrong, and then all of a sudden they give up on everything. They go to the store, they get 2 packs of beers and Ben and Jerry's, and then they hit the Mackies on the way home or whatever it is the people who are too restricted for too long. A good way to think of restriction when it comes to diets is kind of like a pendulum. So the more I pull the pendulum in this way here, and I let it go, the further it's going to swing that way. So if you think this is restriction, the more I restrict you in what you're eating and how the cravings you get and the hungry you get and things like that, at some point something's going to happen that'll make you let go, and the furthest you'll swing that way. But if it's only just enough to get the results, and you have nice food that you eat all the time, and you can have a free meal now and again, or a couple of beers with your friends and things like that, when these things happen, you'll maybe just swing to the middle, or you don't have that massive knee jerk reaction. And this is very much knowing individuals and what some people are like. Like some people are very, very controlled and robotic individuals, especially in jiu-jitsu because they're mostly autistic individuals that like thrive on routine anyway. So they're sometimes not that bad, but fighters in MMA and boxing and Thai are sometimes like different animals completely. Like they can miss 1 day of practice and then go on a 3 day bender. So it's like knowing the person. So it's like if you're the type of person, if you have a bad day, if you have a pint of Ben and Jerry's in your freezer, you know whether you're going to eat that or not if you have a bad day. So we just make sure that's not in the house. So that we can kind of be planned and again communicate about it. So I wish I had like a tip for something for somebody that would say this will stop you making these stupid decisions. But we're all human and we've all done it. And every client I've ever had in 17 years has done it. So it's just being able to communicate. If you are working with a nutritionist or a PT or something like that, and you are scared or anxious to message them to say, look, like I've had a bad day or I snapped and had a burger or whatever it is, that's a problem. That's a red flag because they are not your parent. They are not your teacher. They are not there to tell you off when you do wrong. They are help to move forward and get results. So if you feel that way about anybody who's watching this and working with, then it might be you, it might be them, it might just not be a good fit. Like you should never feel anxious to message somebody to say, I feel as though you're disappointing them. Like their approval isn't what you're after in this process. It's their job to get your results and work together as a team. Like, you would never want to tell your coach that I can't do this triangle setup. Are you disappointed in me? Because they'd be like, no, you idiot. We'll just help you do it. Like, that's literally my job to be able to do it. Like, imagine walking into like a jiu-jitsu school, like on your first day, and going, I'm so sorry, I don't know anything. Like, they would go, yeah, well, of course you don't. It's my job to tell you how to do it. So if anybody is going through that at the moment, then please, like, look at it. And if you've got a great coach, you'll be able to talk to them about it, no bother at all.
Yeah, I think that that's a really important thing to talk about because I think a lot of people don't know what a normal relationship with a nutritionist is and would probably feel those kinds of guilty feelings. And, I think relationships with food are sometimes very, very complicated. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I think that that's something that, people should hear. They should feel comfortable to help work through these problems with their nutritionist. That's super important.
It's um uh, it's something that comes up a lot as well, and I don't mean to speak in generalizations, except but with female athletes especially, um, purely because they have generally had very negative connotations with diet for most of their life, like through the media and other things, being having less body fat and looking a certain way, etc., like makes them think about diet in a very different way. It is changing that way a lot for men at the moment, but historically women certainly. And then if you put them in weight class based sports, where generally the perception is lighter is better when it comes to weight class, which is utter rubbish, by the way. But it adds like then a lot of pressure. And then if they've already got very negative kind of views or connotations around food, it just adds like a massive like spotlight to it as well. So those are all kind of warning flags that like if you feel that way about food or if you feel that way about yourself based on how you eat or how you weigh, like if you step on a scale and it makes you feel negatively about yourself by that number you see on the scale, then there's definitely like going into diets or cuts or doing weight cuts like is not the right thing to be doing. Like there is much, much better options for athletes out there than making you feel shitty about what an electric thing says about you. It's a lot of crap.
Yeah, I think that's a really
Mm.
important conversation to have, an important thing to talk about. In a lot of I've heard a lot of female jiu-jitsu athletes talk about the complication with having to cut weight and being super locked in with the number on the scale. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about like how you deal with that with your clients when they're going through something like that?
Yeah. So firstly, it's having a conversation with them in regards to what their history has been, in regards to weight cuts, how they view dieting, and the experiences that they've had when doing it. So, kind of things to look out for, or like warning signs, is they have been chronically dieting for a long, long time. I get a lot of like female athletes who come to me and they are on a very, very low amount of calories, wanting to lose more weight. And I was like, you are not in the place at all to do this healthily, and I can't do that to you. Fix that, no problem, and then we can start moving on. The second thing is if you are currently or in like diets or cuts and things like that, have lost like your cycle, like that is a massive warning sign that it's not a normal thing and it's not just jujitsu or fighting or something like that. That's like a red flag that we need to be looking out for. So it's having those conversations with them and then asking them in like a very honest, like frank way, what are you looking to accomplish out of either losing body fat and being lighter or going into a certain weight class? What is the reason for this? 9 times out of 10, it's because they think they should just be lighter and they should be in the lower weight class. Because the thinking is, oh, well, if I'm in a lower weight class, I will be stronger than those people in that weight class. But that kind of thinking only comes into it when you have like day before weigh-ins and stuff like that, which a lot of jiu-jitsu events and things like that now do. But there's also a huge amount now that do same day weigh-ins, like IBJJF, etc. You weigh in and then go warm up to fight. So you don't get any kind of like opportunity to put any kind of like fuel back into your body. So it's not like, on a day before weighing, somebody might weigh in at 100 and say 25, 150 pounds, but they may fight at like 160, 170 pounds. Like that's not happening in jiu-jitsu. So we need to have the conversation of what is the goal of competition for you? And for most people, if it's jiu-jitsu, it's I want to showcase my skill set in the best way that I can, put on my best performance that I can, and then if I am good enough, I will beat the people that are in front of me. So that's like great. So what does that look like now? So when do you feel the best? And it's generally when I'm hydrated, when I'm fueled, when I'm calm, when I know what I'm doing. Okay, making you diet won't do any of these things. So that's not what we need to look at. And what we're looking to do in the future. So just because like you may weigh X weight now, thinking, well, I actually do like I may have like body fat to lose, and I might want to like use competitions as milestones and goals that I can hit. I'm not looking at doing a crazy weight drop of 2 or 3 divisions now, but I would like to move down a weight division in a couple of months, and then a few more months after that, another division, and so on and so forth. So I'm not trying to say that losing fat or losing weight won't help overall performance, but I'm saying like, what is the ultimate goal that we're after? Like, if we, and as well, and this sounds harsh for everyone that I can talk to, but absolutely nobody cares at all about being white belt or blue belt world champion apart from you. Like, even the most hardcore people I know, I could say, right, name me all the blue belt world champions of this year in worlds or Euros or Pans or whatever it is, and they wouldn't be able to tell me. So, yes, it's an amazing thing to accomplish, and it is a phenomenal feat to do so because you are the best in the world in the class. But think like, what are we looking to do long term? And for most people who are very serious about doing it, it's like, I would love for jiu-jitsu to be my career. I would love to be a pro athlete doing this. So what you're talking about is actually success at like purple or black and probably brown to black. There's still not many purple. There's the odd phenom in purple who are doing crazy, like big sub shows and stuff, but it's still not very many. So it's having a conversation with people about where we are now, what their history was, and then what we're looking to do. And then say, look, this is the best way of doing this that will get you the results that you want, but not make you fucking hate yourself doing it, because that's the fastest way to just quit jujitsu anyway. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
you know,
totally. Those are all really I think this is such an important conversation to have, and those are all great things that you mentioned. I do want to get into the weight cutting in a little bit, but I want to keep the topic on kind of like fueling performance for a little bit before we get into what a weight cut looks like. And
Okay.
so one of the things that I have been wondering, I'm sure you see a lot of people talking about nutrition online. And so from what you're seeing from people who are not working with you, obviously, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes with people's
Okay.
approach to nutrition in combat sports?
Okay. So I'll try and do top three. So the first one that I see with pretty much everybody is actually under eating for performance. What people will generally do is if they are currently overeating in terms of calories and things like that, they will generally be doing it through um, either like snack type food that's not like like crisps or chips, sorry, like sodas, takeaway meals, like takeout and stuff like that. But they will be doing that multiple times a week and then not eating very much through the rest of the time. Or if they are like centered on their nutrition, they will be still probably under eating for the performance that they require. So under eating's a big one. Um, the second is probably placing too much emphasis on either like fad diets, and I'll include like supplements and things like that in as well, and products that they've generally seen from athletes who are paid to talk about it. Big podcasts might have very, very convincing people who talk in very absolute terms about things and strategies. And that's generally, carnivore, no carbs, fasting. These are the ones that I see the most. Um, and then the I've got the third, but it should really be number one, which is going back to consistency. Most people know what good healthy eating looks like, but they stop themselves by trying to set themselves up in a way that prevents them being consistent. So if you talk about most people, like even in your own gym and things like that, when they say they're starting a diet or they're going to lose some weight, they go, right, well, I train 2 times a week now. So I'm going to start training 5 times a week. I'm going to start lifting weights. I don't lift weights now. I'm going to start running for some strange reason a couple of times a week. And I'm only going to eat grilled chicken, white fish, and salad. And that's all I'm going to eat. And they just try and throw everything that they can at it in one go, which they will lose weight for a period of time, but then it becomes too hard for them to be inconsistent because it's not like sustainable for them. And then they will stop and then they will go back to eating all the food that they've been craving and stuff, and the weight will come back up. So that should be the number one thing. And then I would probably say then it's under fueling themselves, or like not so much under eating, but under fueling. So using the calories that they're currently eating in the wrong way, and then using kind of like fad diets and supplements and approaches and stuff like that that we just get pushed at us constantly all day long.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And you mentioned a couple times like the fad diets. I see those all over my For You page, all over my reels as well. Um, so what do you think about these diets? And do you think some of them may have, may be helpful? And another question I have too is have you ever worked with someone that's been insistent on like, they're keto and they want to stay keto, and then you have to work within
Yeah,
the boundaries of that?
yeah. So the problem with it is that it goes back again to restriction, and because they're so heavily restrictive, that's what gets the results straight away, which allows people to say, "Oh well, this must work because I'm losing a lot of weight." But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's great for combat sports, and it doesn't mean that it's generally like great. Now, there's a thing that I love, and I've said it on loads of other podcasts and stuff, but a man who knows principles, or woman that knows principles, can choose their methods. So all successful nutrition plans must adhere to the principles of great nutrition, which are generally calories, macronutrients, consistency, obviously, micronutrients, and make sure all of these things are adequate. When you've got these in place, you can pick and choose your methods. Now, those methods might not necessarily be optimal for what you're going for. So I have had people come to me and say, look, I just feel better. A classic example is I had somebody recently who said, I just want non-processed foods, like as my own personal choice. And first, it was a conversation of, well, what do you mean by that? Because all food is technically processed. Like, the washing up liquid that you use to clean the dishes you eat your food off is highly processed. Like, what's And it ultimately came to that they just basically wanted single ingredient foods that had been um, tampered with, was the wrong word that they used, the least. And it was like just a thing that they wanted. So that's no problem. We can work with that. Or sometimes I've had people who go, look, I really, really believe that fasting is the best way to do it. And what you do with those kind of people is go, right, okay, well, this is all the evidence that we have, both in like scientific literature, meta-analyses, etc., of the 17 years I've had of coaching, and this is kind of what I believe. Like, and I can present those ideas to you, and then will or has that changed your mind in any way? And some people will go, actually, yes, it has, and some people will go, no, it hasn't. It's just how I want to do it. And at the end of the day, um, they're the paying client, so they will then get a program that reflects that. But then they are told, look, like this is the suboptimal way of doing it. So if you were a competitive athlete, other people will have a more effective plan than you. But if you're prepared for that trade-off, that's absolutely fine. Like it'd be if you walked into, a jiu-jitsu gym now, and said, right, I don't want to learn close guard. I think it's the oldest guard ever. It's old hat. Nobody does it in the game anymore. Fuck Roger Gracie. I don't care what he did. Um, you would get looked at like you're a bit of a lunatic, like by your coach. But ultimately, you are the paying customer. Like if you never came to a session that you knew they were going to coach you in close guard, then they would still coach you for the other sessions. Or if you're an MMA person and said, like, I don't want to wrestle. I hate wrestling. I'm not going to wrestle. I'm just going to stand and bang. Like, there's loads of great MMA guys that never wrestled. Not anymore, but they used to be. Yeah, great. Just never come to a wrestling class. But you're probably not going to be successful. You're never going to be in the UFC without wrestling. Um, but you can enjoy the hell out of your training by not wrestling. But are we looking to enjoy this and do what we really like, or are we looking to be really, really good and one of the best in the world? Because that's a big gap. And something that I think that we do forget about a lot is we love jujitsu and combat sports, and we really go deep on it. And the people that we look up to and we watch and we think, we sometimes forget, like, I am doing this for fun. I've got no desire actually to be the best in the world. So I don't need to do what this top athlete does. Like going back to like what we said like before, like Olympians and stuff and the top athletes and stuff and the crazy people that I work with, they might have one of their family members phone and go, oh, it's your nephew's birthday this weekend. Are you coming over? We're having a party and some cake. I can't, I've got wrestling. And that's literally a conversation that happens. And there's an argument made that is what is required to be the top, but that's not my place to make that argument. But going back to diet, you don't necessarily have to be that person. You can be, look, I just don't want to eat this food or eat this way. So then we put a plan together, but it might not necessarily be the best one. The one that I see a lot and the most common isn't the stuff that I've mentioned. It's actually that they don't want to eat certain types of food or supplements. So it's like I really, really just have my own preferences around I don't want to use protein, for example, like a protein shake. Okay, and there's a million reasons for it, but it's just filtered milk for most of the time. Well, it is like a whey isolate, it's just literally filtered milk. But if they don't want it, then they can certainly have a plan without it. So again, it's going back to what we're trying to accomplish. Are we prepared to give it up on this side, or do we actually we'll make the sacrifices to just be the very, very best in the world? And that's a big continuum.
Right, right. That makes sense. One thing that you mentioned there, you used the fasting as an example, and I'd like to pick your brain on that a little bit because I know in the combat sports world, we've heard a lot of positive things about intermittent fasting, but it sounds like you don't have as positive a view of it. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think about the intermittent fasting?
Yeah, so firstly, there is nothing essentially wrong with fasting at all. Like the only negative for it when it comes to combat athletes is if you are trying to when you're trying to train, for example. So most MMA guys will generally do 2 a days, morning session and a night session. Now, if you a fast in between when you wake to say, let's say lunchtime-ish, as an example for what most people do, like normally 1, 2 o'clock. Um, if you've got an 8 a.m. wrestling class and you haven't eaten a sufficient amount of carbohydrate and fuel in your feeding window on this side, you will have a really sucky performance at practice. So that's an issue that you can have with it. Now, for a lot of people who do it as a hobby or a semi-serious hobby, most classes are on a night and they'll do one a day, or they will train on a night after work. That's absolutely fine. As long as, again, in your, say, feeding window, the time of when you eat, we can get everything in that you need to fuel that performance and recover from that, then there's no problem at all. The kind of issue that we run into it after that is when people start to say magical things about it, that it will cure disease or raise hormone levels or it produces so much growth hormone or these things that are just widely like disproven. So it's same as anything you will always see a supplement that says it will do strip 10 pounds of fat off you and add 10 pounds of muscle, and like it's not going to do that. We have those, they're called steroids, but you're not supposed to do those. Or most fighters aren't supposed to do them. So yeah, I have no like it does sound like I've got like a hate for these things, and I actually have quite a lot of clients who it fits their lifestyle so much better to fast for a few hours in the morning. Like that they don't have to think about food because their mornings are hectic because of X, Y, and Z. So it fits really good there. But if you've got intense practices on the morning, like let's say if we go back to the person who's doing 2 days, the MMA guy, they do a class late at night, and most classes on night run between 6 to 10 p.m. ish, like in that kind of time period. So by the time you shower, get home, it's going to be quite late. Now, some people generally fall into two camps after training. They're either very, very hungry and can eat everything, or they don't want to eat anything. And that's generally after like hard sparring that people don't want to eat. It's because your nervous system is really ramped up and you just simply don't take it. So if you're one of those people and have hard sparring and then don't eat adequately after training because you really just don't want to and you have to force yourself, the next morning when it's a hard session again, whether it be wrestling or whatever it is, you are just not going to be adequately fueled and recovered for that session. So that's when you start running into problems. And that's when you start running into things like getting sick, injury, those kind of things. So going back to it being very individual for everybody, it's that kind of thing. But like, Dave Smith, who is an accountant who just does 3 classes a week that's between 7 till 9:30, can probably fast really, really well. Chad Mendes, who's doing 2, 3 odd days every day, like probably shouldn't be fasting, should be eating carbohydrate at regular intervals. So it's a very kind of fits the person kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense with how it, fits into the lifestyle. That's an important point. Yeah. So I want to get into the weight cutting thing. I know there's so much to discuss with this. And there's different like kinds of weight cuts as you've mentioned. There's like the day of weigh-ins that's popular for jiu-jitsu, and then also for MMA the day before weigh-ins where you can do kind of more extreme cuts because you have the time to rehydrate.
Mhm.
So let's talk first about like a day before weigh-in example. I think I'd like to
Mhm.
start by having you outline what you think like the perfect cut would look like. Starting from a certain amount of weeks out and doing everything by the
Okay.
book if it were a perfect world.
Yeah. So for a day before weigh, so what we're going to have is somebody who, if we take somebody who's going to be, um, a welterweight, say for MMA, got to be 170 pounds. Um, I'll do this in pounds and not kilos that we do over here. So that person probably before has to be, for most people knowing, has to be on the day before the fight, generally in the morning till about 12 p.m. ish, has to be 170 or 170.5, depending on where you were fighting, and if there is half a pound allowance or a pound allowance. So what we're looking at to be on the start of that week is about 190 pounds as the maximum we want to be starting. And we want to be roughly cutting about 10% of their body weight, maybe a little bit more for experienced people. It's less for females personally, but for a male, that's where we want to be. Now, if that means that probably if they're coming into fight week at 200, we probably want it to start their camp at around 210, 215, which will be their walk around. So that's probably going to be, again, anywhere between 10 to 15 weeks out, which is the 12 weeks is the normal type for a camp. But if you get longer or sometimes shorter, depending on the notice that you get, but that'd be the perfect world. So what we're looking to do is bring their weight down slowly over the course of the camp, generally at around about a rough weight of about £1 a week. This will allow us to keep training because don't forget, as their weight is coming down slowly over the course of the camp, their intensity of their training is going up. Now, being fight fit, especially for MMA, feels like death. Like it is not like able to be held for a long period of time. Um, but people by then are feeling pretty run down and stuff like that. But they are incredibly fit and their output is insane. So looking to bring their weight slowly down so that we can support the intensity of that camp as much as possible. Then of the week before the weigh-in, so it's generally going to be on a Friday weigh-ins for most organisations. We're going to look to be around about £190-ish, maybe a little bit lower. Then what we're going to do through the course of that week is bring their weight down through a combination of manipulating the amount of carbohydrate they have in their diet and therefore their body. For those who don't know, carbohydrate is stored within your muscles and a little bit in your liver in something called glycogen, where your body doesn't use, it stores there for energy. So we're looking to kind of like deplete that and bring that down, and that'll bring your weight down. Along for every gram of glycogen that you bring down, you'll also lose a couple of like grams of water as well. So when you're bringing down pounds of glycogen, you will be bringing out pounds of water. Then towards the last kind of 24 hours, we're going to manipulate how the body holds onto water. So this is done by a couple of different methods. Very common ones, things like something called water loading that you might have heard of. This is basically where you drink a large amount of water, like gallons and gallons per day. You build up to this amount and then stop it suddenly. The reason being is that there's a hormone in your body that I can never pronounce called aldosterone. Actually, that's not too bad. That regulates how your body handles water. So what it does is when you drink a lot of water, it produces a lot of this hormone to make you wee a lot, to get rid of this water weight. But then when you cut the amount of water that you are taking in, it continues that because the hormone is still present in your body. So it continues to pull water out of your body. You can accentuate this as well by things like saunas and baths. Baths are the most common one that we do nowadays. It's very rare that you see people doing stupid things like being in sauna suits and saunas and things like that. The reason being is that it's a lot more stable. You can control variables a lot more. They're generally done in hotel rooms. You know the temperature of the water. It's easy to change the temperature of the water. And then basically what you do is with baths, you put people in not a very, very hot bath, but hotter than what your body temperature is to make you sweat. The idea is just to get you sweating. You'll do that for a period of time to start sweating and then come out and be placed generally within like blankets and things like that, or layers of clothing to continue that sweat for a period of time. Then you will stop, check weight, and then do more rounds in the bath. This is generally all done the day before, or sometimes you'll do a day before and a bit of the morning as well, depending on the person. You do all these things to basically make your body get rid of as much water weight as possible. But this very last week, is not fat loss week. You are not losing fat in this week. That time is gone. After you've done this, you will weigh in and then start the rehydration process of putting all of these fluids back in your body, making sure your electrolyte balance is in place, and also putting carbohydrate back in the body to fill them back up. And then you'll get them back up to around about that 200 mark or slightly above. That's why you sometimes see people when you see like the weigh-ins and things like that at events, they can look very drawn out, but then come fight night, they look like completely different people. A lot of people make more mistakes in the refuel process than they do in the cut process, especially for MMA mostly, because even if they're doing it wrong, which is very, very dangerous, by the way, I really want to kind of even though I'm going into this a little bit, weight cuts have killed a lot of people like a lot of people like done wrong. It can cause so many like problems. I've seen over the years so many people go off to hospital and things like that through bad weight cuts. Um, but if they're really tough, then they might just sit and shadow box in the sauna to lose it, which is so dangerous. But I have seen it. Um, then after that, we do the refuel process, which is putting fluids in at the right amount of time to bring somebody up to a good fueled, hydrated place in the right period of time, making sure that like mistakes that are made during that time is people they drink fluid too fast. They don't put the right kind of things like such as like electrolyte balance, like sodium and potassium, etc., back into their body that causes issues. The foods that they take in now start eat foods that they've never eaten their entire camp. In the UK, it's something called Nando's for some strange reason. I don't know why fighters do it. It's like a chicken place. They don't eat it all camp, but they go after weigh-ins. I don't know why. Um, but generally, they'll have like fast food or food that they've been craving. That's a really way to give yourself a really bad stomach and digestive problems. So yeah, they make mistakes there. But ideally, that's not what we're looking to. So when we come into fight night, everybody's fueled, full, hydrated, and feeling fantastic. You'll also get something called like glycogen supercompensation, where you can put carbohydrate rapidly back into somebody's body. So you'll often find that even if they started fight week at say 200 pounds, they'll be fighting at 210, 215, something like that. So that's the day the day before weighing process. There's a lot more that goes on for that, but I've tried to keep it as brief but have information in there as possible.
Yeah, yeah, I felt like that was super comprehensive. How does that differ from what you do for same day weigh-ins?
Okay, so with same day, you've got a couple of different ones. You've got either same day, like very first thing on the morning, which is generally done for MMA shows and things like that, like where people can weigh in like super, super early. Um, some jujitsu shows that like will accommodate people to do this. I know for a fact, like Polaris guys, they're great at doing it and stuff like that as well. Grapple Fest is great at doing it. Um, and then what they will have quite a big window because they'll be fighting like on the show on the night. So they have got quite a big window. So they can actually still do a little bit of a cut for it. So they can might be cutting around about 5%, something around about that. Then you've got ones where it'll be a bit closer. So they may win at midday and stuff like that. And again, that's shortening the window. And then you've got ones where like IBGF where you will literally weigh in and then go compete. The difference that you've got between these three is the refueling process that you're doing after it. The further away the weigh-in from the fight, the more opportunity you've got to put food, fluids, all the good stuff back into the body. IBGF's the least. Like you're not getting any fuel back in. You're just taking a bottle of water with like you to the warm up area to the blood. So for IBGF, you're going to have to be kind of fully hydrated, fully fueled, okay. And that's more of a dieting process than a weight cutting process. Sometimes people call cuts diets, and it's like terminology that gets a bit mixed up. So that's more of a diet and coming in ready. That might mean like a longer camp or a longer process. So like I've got like there's the Euros that happens in January, European Championships, which is I think one of the well, it used to be the biggest entered, but it's still one of the biggest entered in the circuit. So people are in camp for that now. And the reason being that they're in so early is because it happens in January and everybody wants to have like a couple of days off for Christmas. So people get ready early so they can have Christmas off while they do that. Um, but it'll be a longer dieting process than something that has to you weigh in the morning and oh yeah, and then there's one outlier which is Naga where you can weigh in the day before but also weigh in on the day, which is insane. But that's when you get monsters fighting tiny people in the same weight class. Um, but yeah, they're the kind of like things. The bigger the gap that you've got, the more you can kind of play around with your body's water weight and put fuel back in. It's the fuel bit that's important when it gets like shorter.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And you've mentioned a couple times how important the refueling after the weigh-in process is. And what does that look like? If you were to, lay out a plan for a client perfectly, what kind of liquids would they be ingesting and what kind of food would they be having?
Okay, so it basically starts with putting the right amount of water in, which is generally done at the start at about 500 milliliters for the first 30 minutes and then building up from there. I don't know what that is in fluid ounces and gallons. I apologize. Um, and then it'll be based on like having like an electrolyte solution in there. And then that'll work up and start like introducing fruits is generally something that I use first. The reason that we use fruit, or some people use the sugar from that fructose, which is just a carb source, is that your body will put that back into your liver first, which is the first place it stores glycogen before it puts it into muscles. So that's why we generally have something around that. And then we'll start adding carbohydrate sources and meals back in. These are generally foods that you've had during camp or something very, very close to it. They're generally carb sources that are very fast acting and easily digestible. You'll see a lot of things like white rice, honey, um, cereal bars. Sometimes you'll see like potato chips that have salt, like salty potato chips and things like that, that a lot of people use. Uh, excuse me, fruits again. Like jams and things like that that a lot of people bagels is very common. I talk about Rice Krispie squares a lot because they work really, really well for clients. That kind of thing. So it's small foods that are, even though the look of the volume of the food is very small, the amount of carbohydrate is quite big because we want to be putting that in on a regular basis to again fill out people's glycogen stores and get them fueled up. But what you don't want is getting feeling like full and bloated and having digestive issues because that causes more and more problems with hydration and also how the fighter feels. They want to feel great in this process because there's a massive mental component of this as well. Like if they feel like crappy coming into a fight, they will have that to overcome to fight. If they feel incredible and full of energy, then they will have better performances. So that's how we're kind of doing it. The meal size themselves, and that depends on the fighter. Obviously, the bigger the fighter, the more that we're going to put in. And also experience. Some people can eat a lot often. Some people require like just more like a few meals, and it changes on the person. Sometimes people might be a bit slower to intake carbohydrates, so we need to increase the amount. Some people may become full really quickly just because of the process that they've gone through, because it is quite a stressful experience. Obviously, the more stressed you are, you know yourself when you're very, very stressed, you don't want to eat. So if it's like your first time competing in that way or your first time doing the weight cut, the types of food that we will like, I'll give you are generally smaller than bigger meals and set meals and things like that. Because you want easily, like, say a bagel, you can say give two bagels to somebody that you put like a spread of some description on. It's very easy to tear a little bit off and just eat a little bit as you go, rather than having like a bowl of like, rice or oats or something like that. So um, if they're very stressed out, we make it dead easy. And that's communication with the coach as well. Sometimes saying, look, give this person this food there, give them that. And so they don't have to think about it and worry.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And you mentioned that with regards to the liquids, you start kind of slowly. You don't want to go and, chug all the liquid that you can
Yeah,
right away. Why
yeah.
is that? Like, what can happen if you rehydrate too quickly?
You throw up pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you put in like, you'll see loads of people like waiting and then start chugging water like crazy. Like you may see them run off to the bathroom very quickly after that. It can cause stomach upsets and stuff like that. But throwing up is a common one because you just put too much in and the body can't do it. It can also only rehydrate so fast. So sometimes you
Mm.
see people that might not have that, like you just keep drinking and drinking and drinking. And it just goes through them because they're not either putting like the correct amount of electrolytes in it or they're just chugging water where you need to like do it slowly, which is hard for a lot of people, and like, especially if you're inexperienced in it, because the first thing you want to do is like same as when you finish training, it's really, really hard. You go to chug like a load of water. So that's one of the reasons why you don't want to. You need to let your body absorb it in the right speed. Otherwise, it won't absorb it. It'll just start getting rid of it. Same as if you um, like shove a load of food in your face straight away when you get off the scale, you're going to like give yourself digestive problems or you're going to be throwing it up in about half an hour. So don't do that.
Yeah, okay, noted. I didn't know that's what would happen. Clearly, I've never done a severe weight cut before. But yeah, so you mentioned earlier something that I want to get a little bit deeper into about how dangerous weight cuts can be. And I think a lot of people try not to talk about it necessarily because a lot of people a lot of people cut weight and then it's scary to talk about the reality of how dangerous this is. So what is it about weight cutting in particular that makes it so dangerous, and what does it look like when someone is doing a dangerous weight cut? Is it just too much of it, too fast? What does that
Yeah,
look like?
yeah. So the reason that it's so dangerous is you're essentially dehydrating your body. You're like that's what it is. It's essentially dehydration to get rid of it. And dehydration is obviously really, really like serious. Anyone who ever had a hangover will tell you that being dehydrated, severely dehydrated, is no fun. So that's what kills people. They push it too fast and too hard. So the common things that people do in that situation is that they don't know what they're doing. They haven't spoken to a coach about it. They have got no experience in it. They haven't got like other teammates to help them with it, and they're just kind of putting it together themselves on what they think they should do, which is normally something like drink a load of water beforehand, go in the sauna. Um, and it's very, very dangerous. Like your body will just like go into shutdown and start doing a lot of other stuff. Like even a quick Google search on stuff like medical incidents in like high school wrestling through bad weight cuts and stuff like that will become like really apparent. Um, if you see people doing stuff like, having an exercise bike or shadow boxing in sauna suits and saunas and stuff like that, or running blocks and blocks and blocks, or hitting pads in sauna suits and stuff like that, these are all things of like, that's really probably not a good idea. Like extensive workouts, not just getting a light sweat on, because you can cut that way. That's different to very, very intense workouts to be able to do it. But it is a very, very serious thing. Like to be able to do it. Also, there's the downsides of like what actually happens on the night. So, for if you were like 1% dehydrated going into any athletic endeavor, you lose about 10% in performance. So that's the same as in training or as in a fight and stuff like that. So even being mildly dehydrated is going to cause you a problem. Like if you have got a bad weight cut that you haven't recovered from, you've got a severe problem. You'll generally what you'll see with these people is they'll have like 2 or 3 minutes in them and they just gas and they'll go. The other side of it is if you are going to be punched repeatedly in the head, your brain is got a protective sac that runs around it, a cushion between hitting the brain. That's made of water. So if you were like very, very dehydrated, your chances of things like concussion, CTE, all these kind of things that like people talk about within doing striking sports in a safe way, the chance of that goes up massively. So what you'll probably start to see as time goes on is people who did bad weight cuts who might, or even not necessarily bad weight cuts, but repeating weight cuts upwards of doing, they're doing 5, 6, 7 a year plus, it's going to come for them. There's a very good reason why like athletic commissions and things like that won't let people like hard spar or compete for weeks and weeks after they've competed. Or, pro fighters are only taking, two like fights a year, 3 fights a year max, like because they're looking after the health as much as possible. So it's a very, very serious thing that people shouldn't mess around with. Like if you don't know what you're doing, please either talk to somebody who does or just don't do it.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's super interesting. I think that that's something that we should talk about more, especially what people don't understand about how the protective cover of the brain works. And that's the pain that you feel when you get hungover is due to it's a headache
Mm.
and it's due to hydration. I think it's really important to talk about this. Yeah, and one thing that I
Yeah,
just thought of is obviously the rules and regulations around rehydration. The rehydration period is different, like in MMA and commissioned combat sports. In
yeah,
jiu-jitsu, I feel like it's a little bit different, and I'm wondering if any of your clients have ever worked with like an IV bag rehydration,
yeah,
and if that kind of
yeah,
changes the
yeah.
process at all.
It does, yeah. So one of the main reasons, there's a few reasons that like why the change, like not being here. What you mean there is obviously the UFC, you cannot rehydrate through an IV. Um, but one of the big reasons for that is that you can mask certain steroids by using IVs and things like that. So that's one of the reasons why they took it away. It also like it's a medical procedure that should only be done by professionals. The chances of something going wrong is a lot higher. Like if you haven't got a proper saline solution that you're using, etc. You can, if you know what you're doing, they can be very, very good. You can like obviously put glucose as well as saline, like through IVs and stuff like that, which is glucose is just a carbohydrate source to help rehydration. Like glucose and carbohydrate is essential in rehydration as well. So you can do essentially bigger weight cuts with doing IVs because it's easier to put like weights back in, like the water and electrolytes and the glucose, etc., back into people. Um, However, if done properly, all studies have shown that like hydration as a basis is still just as good done via fluids via the mouth and via an IV. So it's not like you are missing out on not doing it through an IV. It's just that you can do a couple of other things as well as rehydration. Um, but yeah, it's something that you're going to see more and more of that coming, especially like one championship, for example, has very, very different criteria than what the UFC has. They have actually hydration tests, etc., that you have to pass before you can fight. You can only put on a certain amount of weight where the UFC doesn't. Like you have to be within a certain weight before you start cutting there. Going down the route of being a lot more like um, like stringent and being precise on the weight cuts that you can do. Um, in a perfect world, everybody would just do what the IBGF do. You would weigh in before you go fight. Like that's the best way. But people would still do stupid stuff around that. But for pro events and things like that, it's just become like a legacy. It's part of the sport. Like you were not competing at the top level without doing weight cuts. It's just a price of business, unfortunately. Unless they turn around one day and say, right, that's it, you win and then you fight, like, and then also pass a hydration test. That's not going to change. But it is getting better all the time. Like fighter safety and things like that is something that so many people talk about. Like nobody wants to see a death in the cage. Like that'd be the worst thing. Like MMA has come so far from what it is, like what it was. Like seeing something like that would be horrendous. So I'm glad that these kind of things are coming in.
Yeah, yeah, I am glad as well. And I think, having people like you on the show to talk about this, I think is really important and, bringing bringing the conversation up and taking steps in the right direction. So if it were up to you, would there be no more weight cutting? Organizations would find a way to, ensure there wouldn't be
Yeah,
weight cutting?
honestly, if I had a magic wand, I would stop it. Which
Hmm.
seems a bit silly because one of the reasons that a lot of people hire me is for the wake up bit at the end, but there's still then the focus would just go to the bit that comes before. I think it would be better for everybody if it went. I really do. It's not like I'm going to turn around suddenly and say, "Oh, well, I don't do wake ups anymore, and I'm not going to work with people who do it." Like, absolutely not. But it's a part of the sport. But I think it will get less and less as time goes on. I do, but it's a big thing for them to change it like all in one go. You know what I mean? Like weight, like for a start, you would probably have to have more weight divisions um, than what you do already because most people kind of fall in the middle of those divisions. So cutting makes a bit of sense. But if you're walking around naturally all the time at, a certain weight and you're in the middle of two divisions, it's quite tricky to know which one you go, especially for women's divisions, like in jiu-jitsu and a lot of like female matches and stuff like that. Like, especially like for like taller women and stuff like that, or bigger women, there needs to be more divisions to make that fairer and give more people opportunities to compete, which is another conversation. But yeah, I hope one day that it goes because it will be healthier for athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think that the one championship hydration test, do you think that that's promising in terms of tackling the weight cutting problem? Because I've heard some criticisms of it and saying that, people are still finding ways to get around it, but I do still think that it's a step in the right direction. What do you think about the hydration tests?
I think it's that. I think it's a step in the right direction. I think innovation comes in all levels of the sport. We've seen changes to shorts that people can wear, glove design to eliminate, well, till John Jones came back, but for eye pokes and stuff like that. Like, there was all that kind of innovation that happened. So it's the weighing process is going to be a part of that. You will always get people who will try and game the system to gain an advantage. Like it's the same as anything. It's why like in jiu-jitsu, like certain guards are invented like 50-50 and things like that. Or, people develop strategies to win off advantages and stalls and things like that. It's why you see people do strategic fence grabbing and stuff like that in MMA rather than giving up takedowns. Like you'll always get people who will like manipulate the rules because we're human beings. So And you will also get stupid human beings who will do stupid things regardless. Even I know how many people do full weight cuts like without the hydration process for like IBJJF events. Like that happens. So it'll always be there. But if the organizations can do the most they can to protect athletes, then I always think that's a great thing.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. So before we finish up, I like to ask everybody that comes on the show if they had one piece of what's the most important piece of advice that you would give for, the people that you work with. So jiu-jitsu athletes, competitors, and fighters. What's the most important piece of advice that you would give them?
Oh, Christ. I should have really thought about this before I came. Right. The biggest piece of advice that I can give to anybody that will apply for the longest period of time, right, is dedicate some time to actually finding out what your maintenance number of calories is. How much it requires for you to eat on a daily basis just to maintain your weight for a month. Like, and that'll fluctuate day to day. So, like, like even what it is over the week. One day you might eat 2,000, one day you might be two and a half, one might be 1,500. It fluctuates for everybody as a normal thing, but find out what that average is for you to maintain your weight. Because then when you get a good idea of what that is, that's when you can start manipulating that to get the results that you want. And then you can look at everything else. So that's probably like, without saying consistency, because I've kind of beaten that drum quite a lot, that'd be the biggest piece of advice when it comes to nutrition that would allow people to apply things easier, such as the other stuff we talk about, such as fueling or what macros to eat or what foods to eat and stuff like that. When like, it's like a bank balance. When you know how much you've got to spend, then what you can spend it on. And most people have no idea how much money they've got in the bank balance. So find that out first, and then that'll give you the biggest dividends.
Yeah, that's a really great piece of advice. And how do you recommend people go about finding their maintenance caloric load?
Yeah. So the best way that they can do it is you unfortunately will have to like track your food. So you'll have to like record what you eat and drink, and that requires you weighing your food. And it also requires things like weighing condiments and stuff like that you put it, like salad dressings, sauces, those kind of things. Milk if you're using it on cereal. Like honestly, it doesn't matter what food you eat. The biggest thing you can do is actually don't change what you're eating. Just track it. And there's a million of great apps that'll do it, help you do it. Just don't pick the AI ones that you take a photo of and it tells you what's in it, because they're complete bollocks. They don't work at all. Don't use them. But ones where you've got to like weigh your food, do that for a week, right? When you're doing this, right, during this time, it's very important that you don't change what you would eat normally. And secondly, what you want to do is you want to weigh yourself every single day on a morning when you get up, after you've been to the toilet, just for a piss, and before you eat and drink and everything, roughly at the same time. Then take those 7 weights that you've done and divide it by 7 so you get the average of what you weigh that week. Everybody's weight fluctuates day to day. More so for women that are on the cycle and stuff like that, or what time of the month that they're in, what point of their cycle, sorry. So take that average and then do that and try and do it for 2 weeks and see if those, like, it stays. It might go up a pound or two. That's fine. It's very common for it to fluctuate. And get that number. But you will have to track for, say, 2 weeks and weigh yourself every day for 2 weeks. But I promise you that investment that you'll make over 2 weeks will pay off so much for you down the line.
Yeah, totally, totally. And you mentioned that for women, obviously, with the cycle, you're gonna have like different weight fluctuations. So for women, do you recommend that they track for the entire month?
Yeah. A good thing as well is, especially if they are looking at doing this for a long term and stuff like that, I use like cycle tracker for all clients. So we can track like where their weight fluctuations are versus where they are in their cycle. Some women fluctuate a lot, especially from like, when they start the period and things like that. Some women gain like 10 pounds quite easily and come off. Some people fluctuate at different points all in the cycle. So a cycle tracker, whether you've got one with someone that you work with, or you can get loads of great ones online and stuff, like apps, etc. It'd be very, very important, because if you're one of these people who freak out when the scale jumps up, when you know that that's coming, the freak out becomes less. You know that you're going to go up a couple of pounds and stuff like that. So if it's your first time tracking as well, I wouldn't start tracking around the time of your cycle because you're going to see crazy weight fluctuations anyway that might drive you a bit insane. So do it after a cycle finishes and then do it for like the first 2 weeks. But then keep doing it a bit more. It would be if you're a woman, I would do it for the full month or the full 28-day cycle, like full 20, well, the full period. Because then that'll give you an insight into what happens because a lot of women don't and they step on the scale randomly and they're like, why am I weighing this? And then they freak out and they do a lot of stuff. And then next week they'll come back down anyway just because it was water weight that they were holding on to. So I would do that as well. So there's a bit of nuance there.
Yeah, totally, totally. That's really interesting. So is there anything that I missed that you want to mention before we finish up? And, where can people find you if they're interested in some coaching?
Um, you can find me on all social media under Unorthodox Nutrition. Um, you can find the website, which is unorthodoxnutrition.co.uk, because I'm in the UK. If anybody has any kind of like follow-up questions or anything, like if I've touched anything where they want a bit more information, just hit me up on Instagram or whatever. I'll happily help anybody with anything that you need. I run a Q&A like every Friday. But if you would prefer it private and me not like answer it, then just drop me a message. Everything's always 100% confidential. If anybody wants anything, I'd love to help you. I'd also like to say thanks for the great questions, actually. Like there was some great questions asked there, so thanks very much. It's really appreciated.
Thank you. Yeah, this